Picture a fire, small, unstable, barely holding against the wind. Around it, maybe 15 people. Children pressed against adults, everyone listening to the dark. And somewhere out there, just past the edge of the light, something is breathing, not moving, just watching. For most of human history, that sound, that presence in the dark meant one thing: danger. Wolves were not companions. They were competition. They hunted the same prey humans hunted. They moved in coordinated packs. Their jaws could crush bone. They could smell a wounded animal from 2 miles away, run it down across frozen ground, and still have energy left. Against that, humans had fire, sharp sticks, and each other. And yet, there are over 900 million dogs on Earth right now. They sleep in our beds, they detect cancer in hospitals, they guide people who can't see, they sit next to birthday cakes wearing little hats. But here's the thing nobody talks about. None of this was planned. No human tribe looked at a wolf and thought, let's make this into a golden retriever. The whole thing started as a garbage situation, literally. Hunter-gatherer camps were messy. Food scraps, cracked bones, animal hides, all of it left behind when the group moved on. To a wolf, a human camp wasn't a threat. It was a meal that required no hunting, and some wolves figured that out earlier than others. The bold ones moved closer. The aggressive ones got a spear in return. The ones paralyzed by fear got nothing. But a few quieter, less reactive, just slightly less afraid found a way to eat without dying. And that was enough. They weren't tame. They weren't pets. But they were different. Here's where it gets interesting, though. Because this isn't just a theory about ancient wolves. We've actually watched this process happen compressed into decades instead of millennia. In 1959, Soviet geneticist Dmitry Belyaev began selecting silver foxes in Novosibirsk based on a single trait: how they responded to a human hand reaching into their cage. The calmest ones were bred together. That's all. No training, no conditioning, no tricks. Within 6 generations, foxes were approaching humans voluntarily. Within 20, they were whining for attention, wagging their tails, licking hands. But then something Belyaev didn't fully predict started happening. Their bodies changed. Floppy ears, shorter snouts, patchy white fur, curled tails. The same physical changes we see across domesticated animals, and the same changes that likely happened to those first wolves sitting just outside human camps tens of thousands of years ago. Softer faces, less threatening posture, easier to approach, easier to keep close. And maybe that's exactly what happened, not a decision, but a drift. Wolves that looked a little less like wolves surviving slightly better, generation after generation, until one day a human looked down and saw something that wasn't quite an enemy anymore. But that still doesn't explain how 2 species that were competitors became partners. That shift happened for a reason, and it starts with something wolves could do that humans desperately needed. Wolves don't just hunt. They read the environment constantly. A wolf can detect a predator moving through brush a quarter mile away. It can smell a bear that passed through hours ago. It can hear something shift in the dark long before any human ear picks it up. For a small group of people sleeping around a dying fire, that's not just useful, that's the difference between waking up and not waking up. The arrangement that developed wasn't ownership. It was closer to a deal. Wolves got reliable calories without the risk of a real hunt. Humans got a living early warning system that never slept, never got distracted, and could track prey across terrain that would take humans days to read. Both sides got something they couldn't easily get alone, and the partnership deepened fast. Studies on modern hunter-gatherer communities that still live alongside dogs, researchers at University College London have documented this in groups across Central Africa and South America show that hunters with dogs have significantly higher hunting success rates than those without, not marginally higher. In some studies, more than double. The dogs don't just help locate prey, they change how hunters move, where they go, how long they're willing to push into difficult terrain. If that advantage existed 20,000 years ago, and there's no reason it wouldn't have, then the groups that kept wolves close didn't just eat better, they survived harder winters, they had more children, they spread further. Some researchers have suggested, cautiously, that dogs didn't just travel with humans as we expanded across the planet, they may have enabled parts of that expansion. But here's what I find quietly strange about all of this. At some point, the relationship stopped being purely practical. We know this because of what archaeologists keep finding in the ground. A site in Bonn, Oberkassel, Germany, dated to around 14,000 years ago. A man, a woman, and a dog buried together. The dog had canine distemper as a puppy, a severe illness that would have required weeks of intensive human care to survive. Somebody fed that dog, cleaned it, stayed with it through the worst of it. These were people who were themselves barely surviving a glacial climate, and they spent resources nursing a sick animal back to health. That's not utility, that's something else. Rocky got kennel cough once, maybe 3 years ago. If you haven't watched my previous 2 videos, Rocky is my dog. For about 5 days, he just lay there, this low rattling sound every time he breathed, completely unbothered by how worried I was getting. I kept checking on him through the night. I didn't question why, it just felt necessary. Those Ice Age people probably felt the same pull and had even less ability to explain it. The biology behind this is real. When humans and dogs make eye contact, both species release oxytocin, the same hormone involved in parent-child bonding. This was documented by Takafumi Kikasui and his team at Azabu University in Japan in 2015. Wolves don't do this with humans. It's specific to dogs. Somewhere during domestication, dogs didn't just learn to live near us, they evolved a direct line into our attachment system. Those eyes your dog gives you across the room aren't accidental. They're the result of thousands of generations of dogs that were better at connecting with humans, surviving longer than the ones that weren't. But that same process, that deep intertwining of 2 species, came with costs that are still playing out today. And some of them are harder to look at than a 14,000-year-old grave. Domestication gave dogs something wolves never had: us. But it also took things away, and the further humans pushed selective breeding, especially in the last 200 years, the more visible that cost became. Pugs and French bulldogs have skulls shaped so compressed that many of them can't breathe properly through their entire lives. They snore, they overheat, they struggle through basic physical activity. Dachshunds develop spinal disc disease at rates far higher than most breeds. Their elongated bodies weren't designed by evolution, they were designed by preference. Some bulldog breeds can no longer give birth without surgical intervention. These aren't edge cases. They're the standard for millions of dogs alive right now. The wolves that drifted toward human camps 20,000 years ago survived because they were functional. The selection pressure was real speed, health, endurance, social intelligence. What replaced that, particularly in the 19th century Kennel Club era, was aesthetics, shape, coat, the way a dog looked in a show ring. The relationship that started as mutual survival somewhere became, in places, something the dog didn't get a vote in. And yet the wolf didn't disappear. Watch a dog circle before it lies down. That behavior has no function on a hardwood floor or a memory foam bed. But on the open steppe, circling flattens grass, checks for snakes, marks a sleeping spot. The behavior is 20,000 years old, and it's still running. When dogs bury food they don't need, they're following a caching instinct from a time when the next meal was never guaranteed. When they twitch and paddle their legs in deep sleep, some researchers think they're running through remembered hunts. The Ice Age is still in there, just quieter. What this whole story actually tells us, from the first cautious wolf at the edge of a firelit camp to the dog asleep on your couch right now, is that this wasn't a relationship built on control. Humans didn't capture wolves and reshape them through force. The first step was taken by the wolves themselves, the ones willing to close the distance, the ones that chose proximity over safety. Every dog alive today is descended from animals that made that choice over and over, across thousands of generations. There's a question I keep coming back to, and I don't have a clean answer for it. Given everything we now know about what domestication cost them, the health problems, the loss of wildness, the dependence, would a wolf choose it again? I don't know. But I do know that when Rocky drops his head onto my knee at the end of a long day, completely relaxed, completely trusting, that's not a trained behavior. That's 20,000 years of 2 species learning to make each other feel safe. The fire's smaller now, but we're still sitting next to it together. If you've watched your dog do something today that made you stop and actually look at them, I'd genuinely like to know what it was. Leave it in the comments.